How's it going, you dirty dogs? Welcome to Churu. I am Jacob, and today is a Sunday, and I was going to go to this festival, but it got cancelled, so there goes my weekend. I thought, what am I going to do now? Well, there's a pretty obvious answer. Cheers, you dirty dogs. What I thought I'd do today was have a little bit of a tasting of some traditional back-sweetened mead. This is a dry mead that I back-sweetened, and run you through my latest project, the Fermentatron. I can't take full credit for this. It was actually my mate Jamie who put me onto the idea. Now, Jamie is yet to appear in one of these videos, but pretty much like 80% of the music you hear on this channel comes from him or our collaborative project, My First Death Ray. Check us out on Spotify if you want. It's pretty good. I think so. Essentially what we're working on here is the ultimate temperature control. Now, to get consistent, delicious flavors without too much off flavoring, you want a consistent temperature when your yeast is fermenting. Now, you can use heat mats. If you've got a dedicated room or a cellar, fantastic. If you don't, there is an easy solution. Like I said, my mate Jamie put me onto this. It's very, very straightforward. I'll explain how it works in a minute. I find when it comes to heat mats and heat wraps, unless you've got something that's properly insulated or a room that has a constant temperature, they're just not powerful enough, and you're going to get that fluctuation. So another friend of mine, Ben, who's a distiller, he invented his own little thing here. He engineered this fucking monstrosity of a thing. It's totally awesome. I couldn't figure out how to use it. That being said, I did make this batch of mead. That was actually 20 litres. Ooh. Using his creation, but the power went off in my house. The little thing reset and I completely fucked it up, so I don't know what went wrong there, but this came out pretty good. If you haven't already, check out my Mead 101. Essentially, I just do a dry mead recipe, then I back sweetened it. This is about 6 months old now. It's good. It's bloody strong though. So I did manage to get his thing working, but it's still a little bit too complicated for me. The best part about his unit was that because the entire thing was wrapped in a blanket, essentially, you could have that outside and it will stay consistently warm. It's a very high-powered unit though, and I did struggle with it a little bit because it was, it's a Frankenstein unit. It was purpose-built, but it was also slapped together by an engineer, so it's not, it's not commercially available. And he just loaned it. I traded him some porcini mushrooms, and in return, he lent me his super fermentinator, and I managed to get one batch out of it before I had to return it. But I wanted something more permanent, something more consistent, something that a big old dum-dum like me could use regularly. And that's when my friend Jamie put me on to this idea. That is probably around 18%. Actually, no, because I proofed it down. I brewed some mead about a year ago, right? And about 2 days in, I went to do a staggered nutrient cycle. I said this in another video, I can't remember which one, but what I did was I accidentally put potassium sorbate in there. Essentially, instead of adding a yeast nutrient, I added wine stabilizer, which made all the yeast inactive, so I just ended up with 5 litres of honey water with no alcohol in it because it was way too, it might have been 0.1%, right? So I had this big batch of honey water sitting there. I thought, what the fuck am I going to do with this? Well, this fermented all the way through to 18% using the fermentinator. I've just called it that. I'm not sure if Ben called it that. I'll ask him next time I see him. But the fermentinator fucking turboed this all the way to 18%. Using a champagne yeast, so I thought, oh man, that's too strong, plus it's very, very dry, it has that harsh alcohol burn, which I don't mind, but it's not for everyone. Point is, I had a batch of dead honey water, alcohol that was too strong, fucking mix the two together, you're set, mate. So before I start talking about this bad boy here, check out my dry hopped mead video. Essentially, this is just a great way to add some extra botanicals and some complexity to your mead. So I like bitter things, I like a bitter beer. I love mead, as you know, but sometimes it can be a bit too sweet. So by adding some fresh sage, mint, and hops, which I had from last season that I froze. Yeah, much more, oh yeah, that's 10 times better. Now you got that mouthfeel. It's not just sweet and sugary. It's not just sweet sugar, honey, and the little, what the fuck? It's not just florally from the honey, you get the floraliness from the herbs that you're using as well. I love adding botanicals, I like that earthiness. And the hops, yeah, it just gives it that nice bitterness at the back. Once you finish swallowing it, you can sort of feel that rising up there. If you have a batch that's not quite there, didn't quite work out the way you wanted, it wasn't complex enough, didn't have all those subtleties, you can just dry hop it, you can add botanicals to it post-fermentation while you're sessioning. Okay, like you would make a tea, just let it steep for a bit, which is why I'm using this cast iron teapot, filled with botanicals. Yeah, Now you have something that's a little bit more complex, a little bit more nuanced, if you will. Let's talk about the Fermentatron 9000. It's not even its final form. All you need is some kind of insulator, like a fridge. You probably have an old fridge kicking around in the shed, or there's one on the side of the road. It doesn't even have to work. There is a benefit to it if it does work, and I'll explain that in a minute. Even if it doesn't, you're essentially just using this as an insulator, just a big box that's going to help regulate that temperature, right? Then you're going to want some kind of temperature controller. Now I'm using this wrapped thing that I got from Kegland, about $100. So this whole setup, minus the cost of the fridge, this is Quinn's old fridge, so nothing, whatever they paid for it at the time. This is about 120 bucks, and the heat mat was like 50 bucks. So this whole project was less than $200, and I've got perfect fermentation, consistent fermentation for forever. If your fridge is working, that's good too, if the days get too hot. So essentially all that's happening here is you plug the temp controller into your power. The red cable is for your heating mat, which I have wrapped around, so I bought a nice blanket that will sit around my fermenter. The blue is for the fridge. Then there's a temperature diode. Now you can put this thermometer, essentially is what it is, into your brew as long as you sanitize it. Some people like to put it in a glass of water because then that will get to that temperature more accurately. Some people tape it to the side, some people just put it in there. Eventually you might have a bit of fluctuation initially. As long as you don't open the fridge too often, the whole box is going to become whatever temperature you set it at. I'll talk about what I'm brewing in a minute, but essentially it's as simple as that. You don't even have to drill into your fridge because the cables are so thin and the fridge isn't running the whole time. It might not even run at all. Like I said, it is beneficial if you're having a really hot day that the fridge does work, because then it will turn on and cool down. It's not going to be running constantly because most of the yeast, especially for mead making, I'm sitting this around 20 degrees, 18 degrees. It was 18.9 at the moment. It fluctuates 1 or 2 degrees. I'm not hugely fussed by that. The yeast that I'm using in this batch has quite a high tolerance. You still want to be consistent. You're probably going to want it for this EC1118. I still want that below 22 degrees to avoid any of those off flavors. I'll talk about that in a minute. Essentially what happens is, if it gets too hot, the fridge turns on. If it gets too cold, the little heat wrap blanket thing will turn on, and you get it, and the thermometer adjusts that, controlled via your temperature controller. So it's just going to be turning different things on and off. If you've got a good insulated fridge, then it's not going to be running all the time. It just comes on and off. If it gets too cold, it cranks it up. Like I said, it gets too hot, it turns the fridge on. You don't even need to drill in because the cables are so thin, and like I said, the fridge isn't on the whole time, so you don't have to worry about a little bit of leakage there. If there is a little bit, essentially you're just using the fridge as a big old box to contain that temperature, to keep it consistent. So it's very, very simple, very cost effective. Once you have the initial outlay, this is super cost effective. You don't have to fuck around. All you need is somewhere to put your fridge. Here I am on the balcony, looking out over my property, right next to my favorite new toy, reading up about my meads, drinking mead. And I'm glad the festival got cancelled this weekend. This is a good day. Nah, I'm only joking, I could really use the money. Basically what I got going on in the Fermentatron 9000 right now is horse apple wine. Horse apple, actually this is more of a mead. This is about 60% honey, the sugar source, 40% sugar. Check out my horse apple wine or horse apple cider, whatever I decided to call it, that video. Essentially it's that recipe. I've just tweaked it a little bit, sort of working towards something that potentially might be commercially available at one point in the future. Probably not anytime soon, but hopefully one day. Check out all my other homebrewing videos if you haven't already. These recipes are starting to get really, really good. Like this is perfect. This is a perfect mead right here. It's a little bit cloudy, I'll admit that. I only racked this once. Okay, and then I poured it straight out of this fucking thing here, so as you can see there's still a ton of sediment on the bottom. And the honey I used was raw honey and to back sweeten it, so that was already quite cloudy. It had a lot of natural yeasts in there. I did stabilize it, but it's still going to be a little bit murky. Then I've added the hops and the other things to it as well, as sage and mint. So it's thick. It's a thick fucking mead, but I like them a bit thick. We're taking things to the next level, so stay tuned. There's going to be a shitload of homebrew videos coming up where we're going to be fortifying wines, we're going to be making beer, we're going to be carrying on, going to do a few microbrewery tours. It's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, I suggest you check out my other videos because I got a lot. I know today's one was a bit sloppy, but what are you going to do, you know? It's a last minute thing. We got some fishing videos coming up. We got some foraging videos coming up. It's almost blackberry season again, which means we're going to be doing blackberry wines, blackberry jams. We're going to be carrying on. We're going to be fucking causing a ruckus. So, stay tuned for that, my friends. Take care.